welcome to In Your Own Words. I'm your host, Kimon Kotos, and with me today is Connie Navarro, a woman of distinction here in Muskegon County, someone who has lived here and worked here for a long time. And Connie is the author of A New Home in Michigan, and we're going to explore her book today and her experiences here living in Muskegon and being part of the West Michigan community. So Connie, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias. It's a pleasure to have you here. Tell us a little bit about your background and what brought you to Muskegon, and then eventually what led you to writing the book.
I was 2 years old. I was born in Round Rock, Texas, and my parents would come in and going to work in the fields. And then at that time, because the war was on, they were working here up north in Saginaw and Wheeler and other little towns in the migrant. They were migrants that came up. My father was from Mexico, my mother from Texas. At that time, they decided, because at that time the war was on and they needed workers to work in the foundries and the shops here in Muskegon, which at that time all the men were in the service. So at the time they went and recruited people from the migrant camps. And so they were recruited and they came. At that time, there was some housing here, which were made. One were for African Americans, the other one's for Anglos, the other one's for whoever, okay? And at that time, the Latinos stayed together at Ryerson Heights, La Colonia as we called it. And that was in the corner of Getty and Wesley Street. At that time, my parents, I was 2 years old, my father started working at Campbell Wine and Cannon, had a brother that worked at Lakey's and two sisters that worked at Lakey's also. I had a brother-in-law that worked at Continental. And so at that time, there was a lot of jobs. So La Colonia came up, and because when you migrate or when you move to a place, especially when you're working in the fields, you get to know people. And we say compadres because those are people that you've either baptized their kids, make their confirmation, their sponsors, or just friends all the time. So from Round Rock and from Crystal City, San Antonio, there was a bunch of migrant workers that were recruited from the migrant fields to come here to Muskegon. At that time, we were small. We lived in the project, which you can see because of this book that we wrote, because of our experience, we decided to write a book. But when we came, we were there at Ryerson Heights. We went to different schools, and because there's always, when you're talking about different districts, there's always a cutoff. If you lived in this side of Wesley, you went to Marquette School. You lived in that side of Wesley, then you went to either Nelson or a different school bunker. And at that time, they were being bused. The only thing is that when we grew up, we all were still living at La Colonia. Then my parents bought a house across the street. When you say, again, when we say migrating, yes. When you say necessity, yes. When you say that you're proud and pride and think and worried because you're coming to work, you don't know if it's going to be a good season or not, just like right now with our season this year. So we were here and we grew up here. And the ones that have gotten together and written this book, we all came at the same time. And our parents were we all were like friends, like family. And so from there, because our parents did not have an education, some did, but very few. Did they know how to read and write? No. My father didn't know how to read nor write, and he'd make a cross. And that's how he used to sign his checks and everything. He was here legally, because he was from Mexico, and every December we would have to go for the first of the year to the post office, and we would have to complete his form to be here legally. So then he said he would tell us as a family, I want you to learn how to work in the field. I want you to go on to school, because that way you can't say that you can't work or you cannot make money. And so his importance was for us to go to school. Out of 11 children, because I was the youngest at that time, I was the only one that graduated. Then came along my brother 5 years after me, and he graduated also, but I was the first one of the whole family to graduate. I went to Muskegon Senior High School. We went through school all together. We brought a lot of our culture, our language. At that time, they were saying, you can't speak Spanish when we were in school because it was our thing to learn English, and that's true. First of all, the ones that are born here in the United States are Americans. So I am an American, first of all. That I'm Latino or Mexican American, or if I was Puerto Rican, or if I was, what can I say, from Africa, that we were still Americans. But our heritage and our language, our culture, are, and you shouldn't forget that. That's one of our main things, okay? So then we grew up, went to school, graduated from Muskegon Senior High School, went to community college when community college was at the Hackley building. And those of us who were born, raised here, a lot of them were born, but the ones that were raised here, when we came, we not only helped create Muskegon, which was, I don't want to get ahead of myself, so let's go back to where I was. When we graduated in that, there was only 2 high schools, which was Muskegon Heights High School and Muskegon Senior High School. So they would be transferred in from Fruitport, from North Muskegon, to Muskegon Senior High School. And we still, the Latinos that lived in Ryerson Heights, the ones that did come to Muskegon Senior, we did hang around together because we still lived around the project. And so then, when we were going to school in that, then they wanted to tear down Ryerson Heights, which was the housing project that we all lived in. And that was a comfort zone for us, okay? Because again, they all worked at shops or they worked in the fields, but we all lived together and we were in the same bracket, okay, all together. Then when they started working in the factories and saved up money, then they would buy houses and move away. But still we kept in contact with each other. And when we were in school, a lot of us graduated, which was something that our parents did not do. My mother knew how to read and write, but she didn't want to. Again, when we were growing up, we would be the ones that would go and translate because a lot of them did not know English. And that was way back in the 40s. But because a lot of our young men that came to work in the factories, the parents, the fathers were in the service, but the sons were still working here. And so they were the head of the household. Then, when they started recruiting, a lot of our friends went to the service also. At that time, again, in the service, there was a lot of different discriminations, and you can still say that it still is, but we worked together. And in the factories, there was every nationality you could think of. And also, when you were migrating in the fields, it wasn't just Latinos. There was African Americans and there was Anglos that worked in the field. And I don't think people see that side of it, but truly, it's true. But when we were living at Ryerson Heights, we still went to work in the fields. We would go to school, then when we had summer off, we'd go work in the fields. And so we went to work in Hart, Shelby, Grant, Holland. In Holland, we would pick blueberries and top tulip bulbs, okay, gladiola bulbs. In Hart, we would do cherries, pickles, apples. When we'd go to Grant, it would weed onions, top onions, pickles also. When we'd go to Fremont, that would be potatoes. So we were all over, and when I think that what we've given to the community is because we're proud to be from Muskegon. I can remember that when we were working in the fields, the ones that would come from Texas and from California and from Florida to work in the fields, they would say, oh, Muskegon is such a great town. The lakes, everything was just nice here. And I would say they think this is beautiful. And I would love to go see California and Florida and Texas. Well, later on I'll tell you I did go. Did I like it? It was beautiful, but no. But the thing is that we went on to school because that was one thing that our parents wanted to do. At that time, when we were growing up, there was only one Latino person that was on the different boards in Muskegon, and she was a commissioner, and her name was Jane Gonzalez. And Jane always was pushing for people to get into different groups, to become a leader in the Latino community. And again, you have to say, why is it? I know that you were questioning, would you like to be called Latino, Mexican American? Because our book is Mexican American, and the reason is because most of us were Mexicans that lived in the Colonia, and but we were all Americans because we were born and raised here. But the thing is that we called our group, which was known in 1991, was called Latinos Working for the Future, which is a nonprofit organization that was started because we wanted our seniors to learn English and Spanish, and also we wanted our kids to learn Spanish. Because even though you live in a household, do you know Spanish? No. If you're from a German background or Italian, I don't think there's very many people that know their own language. And it's a shame because we are who we are no matter which way, okay? Never forget your culture. Never forget your language, because someday you're going to need it. And right now when things are going, it's important. Now they're showing you that to know 2 or 3 languages, that's credit.